The Bears have the rare opportunity to exact revenge very quickly against Iowa State in Thursday's opener to the Big 12 Conference Tournament, but Baylor doesn't usually like to participate in this tournament all too much. That said, craziness all around the conference might open the door just a little bit more towards Baylor's first ever men's basketball Big 12 Conference Tournament Championship. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Baylor. We're previewing the men's basketball Big 12 Conference Tournament for you. I'm Cam Stewart. Drake is on some beach somewhere, so he's handed the keys over to me. So glad that you are making this your first listen today and every day here on Locked On Baylor. I am joined by the one and the only typically anonymous, now about to absolutely burst into your living room, onto your Twitter timeline, and into your heart, Mr. Matt Lanell. That's at MattyIceBU on Twitter, one of the best Baylor basketball minds in the business, making his podcast debut in the postseason. Matt, how you doing?
Doing great, man. I don't know if I deserve that much of an intro there, but this is awesome. I'm super glad to be here.
Dude,
Always
we're
love
so glad.
talking Baylor hoops.
We are glad to have you. We really are. I want to do a quick intro for you. I mean, these Baylor Twitter people, they're absolutely nuts. You don't need to give too much away. Baylor alum, I'm assuming, basketball fan. Tell me a little bit more about your Baylor experience, at least.
Yeah. So I'm actually from the Pacific Northwest originally. I'm from a little town called Spokane, Washington, which you may be a little bit familiar with given the history of Baylor basketball. Grew up an enormous Gonzaga fan. That is life in Spokane, Washington is Gonzaga basketball. Yeah. So I came down to Baylor 2011 and graduated 2015. I had just about the best stretch of college athletics you could ever ask for. The RG3 Heisman freshman year, a couple Big 12 championships, new football stadium, and then, things went off the rails a little bit after I left. But anyway, well, we'll leave that to another day to talk about. But
that's what happened. You left and it all just went out. I went out the door.
Exactly. But, I, as much as I loved Baylor football, and that was a huge part of my Baylor experience, my first love, my true love is basketball, and I love Baylor basketball. It's my favorite team to follow. Been following for a long time now, and yeah, just super excited to talk about them with you.
Yeah, and now they've kind of taken that next step. I'm going to ask you this question real quick because I find it kind of amazing. I was 2015 to 19, so we didn't overlap, but we're like a continuous 8 run here. Yes, exactly. And Baylor basketball was pretty much largely the same in that whole 8 years, and then all of a sudden they just turned this corner. Does that surprise you what they've been able to do the last 3 years? As someone like me who was in the F Shack and watching these teams that were good, don't get me wrong, but it felt like, it had been so the same for so long that it almost plateaued. And we were kind of happy with that, to be honest. But to see them take that next step, has that surprised you?
Well, I don't know if everybody's always been super happy with it. I remember some days when I was in school where there were a lot of people calling for us to move on from Scott Drew. And, there were certain points that were made. I mean, we had, like you said, plateaued a little bit, and maybe it felt like we had reached the peak of what a little program like ours could do. But that's what I absolutely love about college basketball, though, is it's 5 dudes pretty much. I mean, maybe you got a couple rotation.
It's a lot different from football in that.
Yeah, it's not like that crazy barrier that you have in college football. Like any team can put together a hell of a team and compete. And I think when you consistently are as good as the teams that Scott Drew is putting together, you have even more hope. So I always had that in the back of my mind that we could get there eventually. But obviously, I mean, that Natty team was crazy. That team was crazy. I mean, the belief that you had going into every single game that we were going to win, it was just, we're going to win every single time. And if it gets even close, it's shocking. And for a team to dominate start to finish, minus that little, COVID issue that we had there at the end. But, other than that, they just absolutely railed everybody. And that was amazing.
It is crazy. I am such I say realistic. Other people would say pessimistic fan in all my teams. I've never been more confident in a team than that one. Just knowing they were going to win and win pretty comfortably. And it has been very nice to go from like the Kansas State, Purdue type program to Villanova, UConn type program. I know we're not counting all those rings yet, but the quality. Anyway, back to this year. Big Gonzaga fan, kid named after Cameron Indoor Stadium. We're talking about Baylor, naturally. So, Big 12 tournament after that massacre on Saturday. Man, because this divides the fan base a little bit. Not that it's hectic or anything, but what are your thoughts on the Big 12 tournament? What does it mean for this year's Baylor team? Does it do anything for them?
Well, after that last game against Iowa State, I feel like we do have a lot to show in the tournament. I think it would really help us to win a couple of games, not just from a practical seeding standpoint. I think we do need to at least win one or two to maintain a 2 seed, and if we win the whole thing, I think a 1 seed is potentially a possibility right for this team. Yeah. But I think more of a mentality thing going into this tournament. I don't know if we're in a great place, and I can't say I don't know the program, but at least I'll tell you from my experience as a fan, I'm not in a good place because I think that Iowa State brings out a lot of the worst parts of this team, and it's not to disrespect Iowa State, but I don't think they're a very good team. I think they're a solid team, but they are a horrible matchup for us. And they brought up things that have been issues for us going back to last season and have been issues all year this year. And I, at first, was really not looking forward to playing them again. But if you think about it, that now means that we've had 10 straight days of preparing for Iowa State basketball, going back to the last game of the season, going to this game, going to the tournament. That's really good for us because they are a terrible matchup for us. And they bring out, like I said, so many bad things for us. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to prove something to ourselves and to the tournament selection community.
And looking at those 2 losses to Iowa State this year by combined 30 points, 15 each time.
Yeah.
They played great the first 12 minutes of that first matchup. And everything after that has been just awful. And you mentioned it there. They take out the worst in Baylor. We all saw it on Saturday. But with you, who knows a little bit more about basketball than most of us, what were those things coming to light? What were the things that really exposed Baylor?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we have small, diminutive, occasionally passive guard play.
Oh, this is good because this is getting to the tweet part.
Exactly.
You put out the tweet the other day.
I do tweet stuff like this.
Can we pull up the tweet word for word? Because I think a lot of Baylor fans hearing it would be triggered, but this is the platform for you to explain it, and I think you have a good point here. And it was, I'm going to do it word for word. I don't want to misquote you here. I've really enjoyed watching Flagler and Cryer over the last few years, some of the most gifted scorers to ever wear the Baylor jersey. But it's time for a literal change of the guard, like what you did there. You cannot win in college basketball with passive, diminutive guard play. And Iowa State, Marquette, Virginia is going to punk you. The floor is yours at Matty IceBU on Twitter, by the way. Just tell us what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, like I prefaced the tweet, I'll preface it here. I love those dudes. I have loved watching their games. I think they're extremely special players, but the issue with this team is not that they're bad players, but we are very one-dimensional in our guard play. We have some finesse guys. We have 3 finesse guys that can score an ISO, catch and shoot, but they don't put their shoulder down, get into the paint, get physical, get those tough buckets that you need to kind of quell those big runs, or I guess lack of runs that we go through where we're going 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes without a bucket. Because, and this is getting back to your original question, a team like Iowa State, what they do to us is they put this high line press on us in the half court, and they push our smaller guards off of the 3-point line. And we don't have enough firepower at the forward position to really make teams pay for that. And that's where the other thing I've been harping on all season long is I love Langston Love. I love the different dimension that he brings to this team, because he is that guy that, give me the ball, I'm going to put my shoulder down, get that tough bucket in the lane. And that changes everything for a team like this, because all of a sudden that defense, they start sucking in. They're not doing that high line press on the guards. They start kind of moving a little bit, second guessing those really aggressive traps, things like that. It's basketball is all about getting the defense to move around, second guess, not be as aggressive. And when we only throw that single dimension at them of guard play, that finesse play that Cryer, George, and Flagler all play, teams can just commit to one style of defense on us. Yeah. And that's what Iowa State does. They are not that good of a team, but they do that extremely well against us. And then on the other side of the ball, they just move the ball fantastically well. And that just kills a team like us that's not excellent defensively. They really don't have a lot of ISO players. They just move that thing like hot potato, and our guys get tired and it wears us out eventually. And basketball is also just so interrelated too. Like when you're not scoring buckets on the other end, you don't have the chance to come down and set your defense, play half court, and really commit on that end. So we're not making buckets. They're getting out on the break. They're moving the ball super well on us. It's absolute hell when we play them. They're just a nightmare for us. So that's my take on how things have gone, at least.
And now you guys know why I brought him on here, because I've been saying something similar without the best way to back it up all year. I mean, they're just a little too one-dimensional. And when the shots are falling, it looks great. Yeah. And I get that isolation ball is a little bit more of the game of basketball today. But when you face a team like this, I would think it would be effective to do what Iowa State does on offense and just pop that ball around, moving the whole time, a little bit of emotion. And Baylor's just not going to do that. That's not part of their game. So real quick, before we go to our first break here, I just want to say, what adjustment would you make? You've got Coach Drew's clipboard. You've been preparing for one team for 10 days. What adjustment do you make going into today's game?
Well, I mean, that's what's tough, is not having Langston around. I saw a tweet today that it looks like he's not going to play at all in the conference tournament. We're hoping to get him back for the NCAA tournament. So that would be my first go-to, is play Langston, because he's a dog. But I think you got another guy that's kind of like that too, Dale Bonner. I think he is not as talented as those other guys, but he absolutely brings it, and he gets really aggressively to the hole. He's not as, physically, he doesn't have the frame that Langston has, that ability to get inside in the paint, but he gets to the rack a lot more than those other three guys. And we just need that internal. We need the penetration. We need the drive and kick. We need those different dimensions. So I would be pushing the Dale Bonner button. He's been playing fantastic lately. So I think I would be really pushing to get him into the game and to get some more rotation, where it's not just those three guys playing together all the time. Because there's no dimensions. There's no variability that you're throwing at them. We got to rotate those three guards in, and maybe only play two at a time would be probably the approach I would take.
Well, y'all, the weather is getting warmer, and the basketball always gets better when the weather gets warmer. But the other thing is, it means we're closer to summer, which means we're closer to me having to take my shirt off. And that's not fantastic. But what I am doing to combat that is eating a lot of Built Bar. I know you've heard Drake talk about it, and I can absolutely attest to it. I am screaming, yes, every time he's talking about Built Bar, because I love it. They've got great flavors, and it's great for you, which is tough to find. I think of that great stuff that's great for you. The vegetables, the fruit, they all suck. They taste bad, but Built Bar tastes really good. So it's easy to eat. You catch what I'm doing here? Yes. Built Bar now available at Sam's Club and Walmart. So no excuse, y'all. No excuse when we get at beach bod season. Built Bar, get on that today. All right. Back here with the one and only Matt Lanell, and we're talking a little bit conference tournament, because that's what we got on tap, right? That's the most pressing thing. But I'm worried, Matt, that by the time that people start listening to this, Baylor's already going to be out of this tournament, because they usually boycott it. It's not really their thing. To each their own, right? So now we're looking at the big dance, okay? And we have heard all season long from national pundits, especially, that this team is built for March. And we as fans have been seeing this absolute roller coaster ride, and these problems that were plaguing them early in the season that you thought, all right, a Coach Scott Drew team will get rid of these, put them in the rearview mirror. We won't see them again. And then they come back at the wrong times of the season. So I ask you this. What kind of Baylor do we need to see a run in March? What is going to make them winners in the first weekend at least?
Yeah, it's like you said, there's been a lot of issues that I thought would get resolved over the course of the year. And I think part of it is just the roles that different guys are wanting to play on this team and how they're all fitting together is just not gelled as much as we wanted to. I mean, I think a big thing is Adam Flagler getting feedback from NBA GMs and scouts that they want to see him play more of a point role. That's not Adam Flagler's natural position, right. And it's throwing everything else off with this team. And that I think a guy like Keante George really should be your primary ball handler. And I think he should have been all year and developed into that role where he's getting past the turnover issues and maybe some more of the erratic play that he struggled with at times. But instead we've kind of just more leaned on Flagler, and he's not a natural point, and it's not the best way to run this team in my opinion. So I guess to answer your question, what do we need to see out of this team in March? I think you need to see Keante really take the ball. And he has just that nuclear scoring ability, but I think some of his best games have come when he hasn't done a lot of scoring, when he's just taken care of the ball, moved it around, really run that true point. I think that's the best version of this team, is when Keante's the actual point guard of this team, because he's phenomenal.
So you are not on the short-lived train ride of maybe this team is better without Keante George in the lineup.
Oh, no. I'd never believe that.
There were some rumblings. No. You have beat the charges. I enjoy that. I mean, it was nice to see, obviously, Dale Bonner get a bigger role. But yeah,
I think we're going to need him too. Just
for sure.
Langston's injury. So I think he's trying to fill in that role that Langston plays. But yeah, no, I mean, Keante, I think this team will, for better or worse, go as far as he takes us, because I don't think that ISO Adam Flagler ball is going to win us a national championship. As phenomenal as he is, you can't put it all on one guy like that. And when the team just kind of stands around and watches Adam do his thing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you have to put together a lot of wins to win a national championship. So you need a guy like Keante with the ball in his hands running the show. And I think they'll take a lot of pressure off the rest of the guys too.
And do you think that's been kind of the biggest difference versus the last 3 seasons? Obviously 2 with Davion Mitchell, 1 with James Akinjo, very experienced point guard. Do you think that's the biggest difference between this Baylor team? Because the offense, as great as it's been at some points, has really looked lethargic at other times, like as bad as we've seen it in those 3 or 4 year stretch. So is that the only difference that is kind of separating this team from the last couple?
I don't want to like oversimplify things, but I do feel like that really was a big break for me, is when Akinjo went down with a tailbone injury. I don't really think Baylor basketball has looked the same since then, spanning over, a season and a half or so. We just haven't had a true point guard, a true healthy point guard. And the team has really suffered because of that. And I think that's something that I've kind of realized in watching basketball. I think you watch the NBA and you see this positionless basketball. No, a lot of teams don't even run a true point. And you kind of forget that there's a big difference between the NBA and college basketball. And college basketball still very much is a sport where you need a true point guard to run the show.
The defensive intensity is too much better.
It's a smaller
too
court.
Much different. Yeah.
Teams are pressing you, creating turnovers. Like, there's so much more spacing in the NBA that you don't need a guy that can really wiggle around the defense and handle guys hacking at him, all that. In college basketball, you need that. We just haven't had that for a year and a half now. So that's going back to my previous answer. I think that's got to be Keante. He's the guy that can do that.
And I would say the other thing is we have talked, we've name dropped a lot of guys here in this show so far, all of which have been in the backcourt. What does Baylor need from their front court in order to make a run, to be playing in April?
I mean, our best games have been when Flo Thamba is absolutely crashing the boards and creating multiple chances for us on offense. And, obviously bringing that intensive, that attention on the defensive end as well. I felt like in his short campaign so far this year, I did feel like that last game was probably Jonathan Chamachachua's worst game that he's had so far. I think he really struggled on defensive rotations. I think he struggled on the boards a bit, which part of that is just I don't know how much bounce he has coming back now, but I do feel like we need more from the bigs in that way. I think we're not a team that dumps it down to the post. We don't really need a lot of buckets from them in that way, but we need guys hitting the boards hard. It can't just be Jalen Bridges. And God, I love that kid. Every single game, all I say is thank God we have that kid, because and thank God he's not what he was the first few games of the conference play or whatever. But he is just everything to this team. He flies around on defense. He crashes the boards hard. He hits those tough corner threes that gives us the spacing. And he needs help though. Like, we need guys crashing the boards and playing really solid defense inside. Like that's how we won a national championship. It wasn't just the guards balling out. We were bullies inside. So I think we do need to get back to that identity. And thankfully those guys were on that team and they've done it before. So
yeah, experience definitely helps. Are you confident enough to put any money down on this team?
I usually don't put money down on teams that have my heart, because
it's tough to do, man.
It just kills me. But except when we that national championship team, I put plenty of money down on them, because that was just stealing candy from a baby, So I could just take all the money from all my friends from back home that all thought the Zags were gonna win. I was like, they haven't played anybody like us, though. They have not played anybody like us. So,
I'm going to lose some money over the next month, but I won't lose as much as I was going to, because I'm going to be using FanDuel.com. That is the best place to put down your wagers. They really help you. They're trying to make it idiot proof as much as they can in terms of sports gambling. So that's why I use it, because I'm typically losing a lot more money than I will using FanDuel. Y'all know that is the official sponsor of Locked On Podcast. If you use FanDuel.com, that's where you're going anyway. FanDuel.com/locked on, you're going to get $1,000 bonus bet. There is no better time of the year for sports and for sports gambling. What we're about to head into, okay? Regular season's wrapping up in the NHL. It's wrapping up in the NBA. We're headed towards those playoffs, which are going to go on for a couple of months. We've got the Masters, and we have got March Madness, the greatest tournament in all of sports coming up. And you need FanDuel to really be in on the experience. FanDuel.com/locked on, $1,000 bonus bet. Get on that, y'all. March Madness coming up. And the madness really started, Matt, this week. There is a weird scenario where the Big 12 could have 3 head coach openings in the state of Texas, and just as easily could have none, because none of them have been fired yet. But obviously that's Texas Tech. Mark Adams suspended. Rodney Terry, don't know if UT is going to stick with him or not, as he was pretty much just the interim. Who knows? They've had a heck of a season under him. And the other one, recently, yesterday, Jamie Dixon. Is he on a hot seat now? Because maybe their best player, one of the best big men, well, not better than Mike Miles, but one of the best big men, if not the best big man in the conference, Eddie Lampkin, is out, leaving TCU, and citing Coach Dixon as the reason why. In some screenshots of his text messages with him on Instagram, he's basically saying, you mistreat your players, you were using racial remarks, I don't want to play for you. What was your reaction to seeing this yesterday, Matt? Because this couldn't have come at a worse time for TCU. Yeah. This was a team that could have messed around and won this tournament, this conference tournament. They're a good basketball team. All of a sudden, the big guy in the middle is like, nope, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I saw those screenshots that he posted to his Instagram, and it's really sad stuff. I mean, it's the same type of stuff that Mark Adams, it seems like it's the same line of commentary that both of them are bringing, and this idea that they own these players. And it's just, thank God we have the transfer portal. I think overall it's been a negative to the product of college sports, but the product isn't all that matters at the end of the day. These are real people. These are their livelihoods. This is their future. And the idea that they would be, perhaps the incentives were set to kind of make kids feel trapped in programs. Thank God they don't have that anymore, and can move on from a toxic relationship like that. We don't know exactly what has happened there, but it did seem from the way he was in that screenshot, how he's interacting with what I assume is an assistant coach, kind of almost confirming that this language of "we own you" and all that. I mean, just absolutely messed up. And yeah, I mean, is he on the hot seat? I mean, absolutely. He's gone.
This is one of those things is who knows, right? Yeah. And we don't know with Mark Adams either. I mean, it seems like this could be an easy way for Tech to maybe get out from underneath that. I don't know how much they really wanted to stick with Mark Adams much longer. This could be a nice way out in quotations. And hopefully that product thing is kind of coming up behind it, because you said it. I mean, both with NIL and players making money and being able to get out of these situations, I think everyone can agree that that is good. That is good for the player and good for everyone involved. Yeah. But maybe it's just us as fans need to get more used to it. But this is crazy for TCU. This was a team that was poised to make a run. I mean, on paper, it's probably their best team ever. And all of a sudden, the rug gets taken out from underneath you. And we have seen this TCU team play without Eddie Lampkin. We've seen them play without
They're still
Mike
gonna
Miles.
be competitive.
They're dogs, man. Yeah. They are absolute dogs, especially on the defensive end. Like, that's what we saw from Tech last year and a couple years before, and West Virginia back in the Press Virginia days. That's how good defensively this team is. So I ask you, can they still make a run in this tournament and the big one?
100%. I honestly, I was shocked that Mike Miles came back, that he didn't get more positive feedback from the draft. I think he's an NBA guy, and he's just different. He moves different, he scores different, and when you have a guy like that, you can do anything in college basketball. Yeah. Whether they can put it all together and win a championship, I mean, it's hard to say, especially with this turmoil in the program, and you might not even have a coach going forward. But when you have a guy like Mike Miles, you can do anything.
That's the state of the union on TCU as we see it as Baylor fans. Baylor, Iowa State, Thursday, Big 12 Conference Championship. Matt, give me your prediction on this tournament for Baylor. Where do you see them going?
I'm gonna put my cynic aside, I'm gonna have some hope here. I think because we get Kansas.
Someone's got to.
We get Kansas next round, right? If we win, I
pretty much, yes, yeah.
Bracket plays out, and I think those are two teams that we have seen, like we addressed with Iowa State. We've seen the worst of us, and with Kansas, we've seen both the best and the worst of us, and within games even against them. So I think we right a lot of wrongs against them. And I think Scott Drew really shows his quality as a coach here. And we put together a hell of a run in the conference tournament. I think we could win the whole thing. That's the optimist side. The pessimist side says we're the same team that we have been all. Don't do it. We're the same team that we've been all along, and we don't even make it out of the first week or first game. So I think it's one way or the other. I don't really see us having an average run here. I think it's you either fix the issues and you go on a run, or we're just gonna have to maybe figure it out in that gap in between, which we've done before too, between the conference tournament and the big dance. So yeah, I don't know. Hey. There's a lot of questions that are gonna be answered in this Iowa State game. And like I said at the beginning, like we've had 10 days to prepare for a not elite team. They're a good team, not elite. So we'll prove a lot about what this team is capable of in this game, I think.
Matt Lanell is saying they are going to win the conference tournament for the first time ever. You heard it here first. Hey, last two national champions have come from this conference. Neither one of them won the conference tournament. All right, that's it. Locked on Baylor. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. He's Matt Lanell. That's Matty Ice BU on Twitter. I'm not kidding. Genuinely one of the best Baylor follows on Twitter, especially when it comes to the sport of basketball. That's him. I'm Cam Stewart, a much less entertaining follow. This has been Locked On